Welcome to the Awaken on Purpose podcast, where each week you'll hear inspirational stories of heart-centered leaders who have awakened to their higher purpose and taken that leap of faith to follow their heart and make an impact in the world. Get ready to be enlightened, empowered, and transformed with your host, Jennifer Spohr.
Super overjoyed to welcome as a guest to the show today, Robyn McKay. She is an award-winning psychologist with a PhD in counseling psychology and a global authority on leadership, careers, and relationships for high EQ women leaders. Her referral-based practice draws in top talent from Fortune 500 companies like Nike, Intel, Experian, Honeywell, and others. Hollywood executives and members of the AMA, ADA, and Society of Women Engineers make her their go-to choice for burnout recovery and discovering what's next for their lives. Welcome, Robyn.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you, Jennifer.
I'm happy that you're here with me. We always have a good time.
Yes, we do.
So, Robyn, what inspired you to actually do the work that you're doing today? I know that's a big question.
Yes. Shall we start at the beginning?
Yes.
How much time do you have? Okay. When I'm going to say I was 5, I knew I was going to be a doctor and I would write books. I knew those two things for sure. And when I was 5, my favorite TV show, this will date me, I'm Gen X, was the Waltons. And my favorite character on the Waltons was John Boy, who was a writer, and he used his Big Chief notebooks and pens to write. So I myself had Big Chief notepads and pens, and I decided I was going to write a book like John Boy. So I laid down on the floor with my notebook and my pen, and I started to write and was appalled that I didn't have anything to say. So that began my quest to really find my voice in my writing and in my speaking and so on. I didn't know it at the time, obviously, being only 5. And then around the same time, I knew I wanted to be a doctor. And I'm of the generation that there were still a lot of gender roles being played. And I used to go to the library and check out 2 books. One was the I Want to Be a Doctor book, which the main character was a little white boy with blonde hair, and all the pronouns, of course, were he and his and so on. And then I'd check out also the I Want to Be a Nurse book. And the I Want to Be a Nurse book happened to have a little blonde girl in it, of course, because it was the 70s. And it had all the she pronouns, the feminine pronouns. So I would check out both of those books, and I would read the copy from the I Want to Be a Doctor book, and I would look at, and I would change the pronouns, and I would look at the pictures from the I Want to Be a Nurse book so that I could sort of somehow integrate that I was going to do this thing. So that's what was going on when I was 5. And flash forward, so there are a couple of things in here that you'll understand why I'm bringing this forward. I also knew I was going to be a scientist. I love doing research. I got my first microscope when I was about 10, and I was really appalled at the light source. It was a mirror, and I really wanted a real microscope instead of one that was a toy. But that sort of began my journey to understand myself as a smart girl, as somebody who had something to contribute to the world in probably a new way, something that had never been done before. So that's my early beginnings. Shall I go on, or do you have any questions that arise as a result of my story so far?
No questions.
I should say too, when I was in 6th grade, I wore a t-shirt. My mom would have to wash it, so I didn't wear it to school every day. It said, anything boys can do, girls can do better. And that was sort of my mantra from the time I was a little girl. I have no idea how I became such a feminist at such an early age, but I did. And so I got my undergrad in biology. I was supposed to go to medical school, and I didn't get in, and I didn't have a mentor at the time to tell me, dude, like a lot of people don't get into medical school, try again. So I found my way into the pharmaceutical industry, and I did drug development research for several years with my undergrad in biology. I worked in a biosafety lab for a while, so I actually got to use those high-powered, really cool microscopes that I had dreamed of when I was 10. And eventually I burned out, and I didn't know I was burned out. All I knew was that I wanted to do something different, and I wanted to make a more clear impact on women's lives, especially women who were in STEM fields or going into STEM fields. And so I was probably, I don't know, let's say I was probably 27 or 28 years old, and there was a really cool organization in Kansas City where I was living called Girls to Women, and it was actually a mentoring organization for middle school girls to encourage them to pursue careers in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And so I volunteered for it, and I ended up working with some of these they weren't necessarily at-risk girls, but the community did, the organization chose girls from the community to reflect the community that it served. So it was a stratified, randomized sample that they would pull from. So they pulled so many Latinas and so many African-American girls and so many white girls from the pool that they had access to do this program. And that Girls to Women program really set the tone for what I've been doing from the time I was 28 until now, so many years later. And that is, finding, gathering, guiding, encouraging, and advancing women, especially those high emotionally intelligent women who are, as adults, pursuing careers in technology as engineers and scientists, and in medicine as physicians. And one quick story I want to share with you that goes along with this whole kind of how I got to be able to do what I'm doing. I was in grad school at the time, so I was in my early 30s. I was studying at the University of Kansas, and I was working with my mentor that I wrote the book, Smart Girls in the 21st Century, with. And I had been working with a group of middle school and high school students, not just girls, but just students. And I was looking for cool stuff for them to do in the summertime to, enrich their careers or to advance them. And I found this really cool summer camp that was offered through the KU School of Engineering. And the advertisement was amazing. You camp all week, you build bridges, you blow stuff up, you send rockets into space. It was so awesome. And then the last sentence of that advertisement read, "For boys only." And listen, Jen, this was 2005. It wasn't 1972. It was 2005. And I knew enough, even at that time, because I was a science girl myself, that, there weren't a lot of girls in science. And I knew the data. I knew that there were only about 10% of engineering classes that were female. And how dare they? And I was really indignant. I remember after I read that advertisement, I went down to the Starbucks where Barb, my mentor, was working, and I ranted and I raved as only a graduate student can. I was indignant. I was spouting facts and data and how dare they and whatever. And she just looked at me across the top of her reading glasses at some point, and she said, "Robyn, you've reached a point in your career where you just can't be angry about it. You have to do something." And that shut me up for about 3 years because I didn't know what to do. So flash forward, I finished my PhD, I finished my postdoc at the University of Missouri, and I landed at Arizona State University at the Polytechnic campus, which is all science and engineering kids. And I'm working as a psychologist there. After my first year, I had really recognized that there were a bunch of girls on campus, and there wasn't a gathering point for them. There wasn't a place that they could come together and celebrate their wins and process through what it was like to be a girl in STEM. Even at this time, this was 12 years ago now. Even at that time, there was still a paucity of girls in STEM programs. And so I remember I was sitting around the round table with my colleagues at the end of the year, kind of thinking about what we want to do next and how we want to run the next school year. And out of my mouth, it wasn't a conscious thought, but out of my mouth comes, "I think I want to start a WISE program, a Women in Science and Engineering program." I didn't even know what that meant or what that was or anything, but that's what I said. And within about 2 weeks of that, somebody had made appointments for me to sit in front of the dean of students and the dean of the College of Engineering to tell them that I wanted to start this program. And they, of course, were hugely encouraging of me to do that, even though I didn't know what the heck I was going to do or how I was going to do it. So I started that program. Founders Day was September 17th, 2009. And that program, it's still in existence in some form, but that program has gone on to help so many girls, not just in the like how confidence in math and science, but confidence and belief in themselves as contributors, as leaders, as women of value who use their seats at the table for good. And so that kind of was the nugget of or at least a starting point of my work that I'm doing today. Now, 12 years after that, my work has evolved quite a bit. I left ASU. I went out on my own. I made the leap and started my own business as an executive coach internationally. I actually launched my business in 2013 from Paris in a little walk-up apartment in the 4th district. And, it smelled strongly of patchouli and had a crappy Wi-Fi connection, but it didn't stop me. And I've just been doing this work ever since. I've been doing my work in executive coaching for high EQ women leaders. So it's basically the grown-up version of the girls I was working with at college. And in fact, some of those girls from college who I worked with actually have come back in and hired me now that they're working professionally to help them with the next phase in their careers as well. How's that for a story so far?
I love your story. I'm learning things about you that I didn't know. In terms of becoming an entrepreneur, that's not a path that is for everyone. So what was the driving force behind you making the decision to go that route?
Two things. One, I have to think. I'm a 4th generation entrepreneur on my dad's side of the family. So in some ways, it was in my bones that I would go this direction. I forgot to tell you, I used to play Office when I was a kid too, and I would pretend like I had a business.
It was like instilled in you.
Yeah, I'd have my invoices and my pens, and I'd make appointments and the whole thing. So that was another piece of the puzzle for me. Looking back on my childhood, there are always clues that you can see the influences.
Yes.
So that was one. But the other piece that I think is really important is that, I had my PhD. I won awards for my work. I was doing really good work. And, it wasn't, listen, working in higher ed is rewarding in a lot of ways, but the one way it's not rewarding in is financially. Remember, I worked in the pharmaceutical industry before I got my PhD and even during my PhD. And that was actually what sustained me during all of my education is the pharmaceutical industry pays really well. They have bonuses and I got raises and promotions. I ended up being promoted to a senior manager position before I eventually had to leave to go do my internship full time. So working full time in higher ed, it was, if I didn't have I love beautiful things, Jen, and I love to travel, and I don't like to fly coach. And yeah, I want to keep money in my pocket, but I also want to have beautiful experiences. And I just knew in my heart of hearts that I couldn't do that. And I couldn't work in higher ed and do these things. It just didn't make sense. I was single. I was the sole provider.
You're able to do both. You're able to do what you love, have what you love, and make a difference.
And financially, that was a big piece for me. It's not the only, listen, don't get into entrepreneurship just to make money. That's such a bro thing to do. But for feminine leaders, for spirit-led leaders, it's like there is a way to bridge the gap between, being of service and being paid well for the service that you provide. And that's where I found my sweet spot in working with these executives in tech and healthcare on burnout and career development and all the things that I do.
Robyn, every experience in our lives serves a purpose. What experience in your life do you feel has been the most significant in shaping who you become today?
I feel like you need to put the Jeopardy song on for me so I can think about that for a second.
Dun, dun, dun. No, I'm not even.
Thank you. I think I don't know if I can point to one thing, but I do know this, and I heard this a long time ago. You as an entrepreneur will agree, is that the best personal development program on the planet is becoming an entrepreneur. And, when I left ASU to start my business, I knew I could do high ticket sales. I generated a lot of money doing that and working with really awesome clients from the get-go in my private practice before I made the leap full time. Making that decision to leave, though, was not an easy one, even though I had all of these things in place in terms of I had confidence in my ability to sell. I knew my list bill. I knew all the things I had to do. What I didn't count on was the toll that leaving a major brand like ASU, Arizona State University, would do to my psychology. Because when you work for an organization like ASU or like, where did you work? Bed Bath & Beyond?
I can relate. Yeah, as you're saying that, I worked for Bed Bath & Beyond. Yeah.
So when you work for an organization like that, that becomes part of your identity. And I really struggled with, well, who am I? If I'm not an award-winning psychologist at ASU who has started these first-in-class programs and who's helped all these people and won all, whatever,
yes.
Who am I? If I'm not with ASU, then am I anything? And it was really, kind of a commentary on the culture I was in as well, because that was kind of, I think, the subtext of, maybe not for everybody, but it was definitely something that came up for me during my tenure there. And so making the transition impacted my mind, body, and spirit. And the thing that I didn't count on was how much trauma the leaving would bring up for me. So I think I spent probably the first 6 months, even though I made 6 figures in my first 6 months out into entrepreneurship, using solely just connections on Facebook. I got hired from people who I would meet in groups and things like that. But even though that happened, I was in trauma and panic most of the time. In fact, I remember I was at my sister's house one day after I had left ASU and I was sobbing. I was just like I was in a panic attack, actually. And she said, "Did ASU ask you to leave?" And through my tears, I'm like, "No, why would you even say that? How dare you?" And I got all indignant about it. And she's like, "Well, then why are you crying? Like, I don't get it." And for good reason, she didn't get it. She didn't understand either that I was experiencing some real deep trauma around not being connected to, the energy, the patriarchal energy of, I'm going to do my work and I'm going to get my paycheck every 2 weeks from this organization. And they're probably going to take all my intellectual property and, put their name on it. So I'm not going to get paid for that, but, at least I'm safe, right? Or safe in terms of like, I know I'm going to get a paycheck every 2 weeks. And having to develop that self-reliance, I say self-reliance, and what I mean to say is, yes, it's a self-reliance, but it's also a reliance on my connection with God, with the divine, having to really rely on that and lean into and trust that I could actually do what I thought I could do, that things were going to show up for me in the way that felt good and felt fulfilling and felt safe. Those were things that I really had to work through. So I really think that the early stages of my business that I'm in today it was a huge period of growth for me. And it helped me to really understand when somebody comes to me and they're in a corporate position and they say, "I want to make the leap," I can assess pretty quickly if they've got the chops for it. And I don't mean that lightly. I don't mean that, in a teasing way. It's like, this is not for the faint of heart, this journey.
No, yeah, I'm really glad that you brought this up, and there is no doubt going to be many people, we're having this conversation that are going to be meant to hear this. It was very similar for me. My biggest test of faith in myself and the divine, and the biggest test in my mindset was making that transition and leaving. It was just a whole new level of learning how to lead and rely on yourself, and and it was a lot of grieving and mourning too, because I became a different person. You were saying earlier, detaching from that patriarchal energy. So really just realizing how much my identity was tied up in my job, and yeah, I just can relate to what you're saying. And I know there are going to be so many other people that do too. And that's not to deter anybody from taking the entrepreneurial path. But like you said, you should never get into starting a business just for the money, because it's about so much more than that. If you look to take the entrepreneurial path because you're pursuing what feels like your purpose and you're doing something you love, that's the right reason to go after it, to make a difference, because I feel like that is what carries you through some of those times,
Yeah, for sure. It reminds me, when I was making the decision to leave, I had helped to start another program at ASU. So I started the Women's Science and Engineering program, and I got recruited to help start the Herberger Academy, which is a young scholars academy. So it's for gifted kids who are high, the super high ability, radical acceleration kind of program. And they asked me to come in and do the psychology piece. So I did that. And I was there for about 1.5 years when I realized I really started feeling bogged down by it. And, I would bless those kids' hearts. I love the kids, and they would come to me sometimes and, Dr. McKay, do you have a tissue? I'm like, I'm not your mom. Like, I don't, like, that wasn't in my wheelhouse in terms of like having to be in a nurturing kind of mommy role for children. It was a very interesting thing personally for me. But then even as I was working with the smart girls there, the girls who, and I call them smart girls, that's the name of our book too, is Smart Girls in the 21st Century. But when I was working with them, I realized if I don't do this thing, if I don't make the leap, and if I keep saying, I'll just wait until later, I'll wait until this first cohort graduates, or I'll wait until someday in the future. Here I am telling these girls to go out and live their dreams, to find their flow, to contribute in major ways. And I'm sitting here sacrificing my own goals and dreams so that, I can be there for their, high school graduation. I thought, what message am I sending them? And that was really a defining moment for me, as I actually made the decision to leave after the end of my second year there. I was sitting on the beach of Lake Michigan with my mentor, Barb. We had just finished doing a presentation for a bunch of professors. She's smoking a cigarette because that's what she does. And I'm just sitting there on the beach with her. And I said to her, I think I'm done at ASU. And she, took a few more puffs, and she finally said, I think you're done too. And I didn't need her permission, but it was one of those moments in our relationship as a mentor and protege where it was sort of like a fulfillment of the contract between the two of us.
Oh, I get the chills as you're saying that too. Yeah.
So I got back from there, and I wrote my letter of resignation, and I have a dear colleague who's still at the Herberger Academy, Kim, who was the director at the time, and she was the one I reported into. And I remember I walked into her office, and she didn't see it coming. She didn't know that there were just a lot of things going on at the time, but I just walked in and slid my resignation across the desk at her. And she was stunned. She was also supportive, but it was one of those moments where I was like, I'm doing this. Now is the time.
Yeah.
And by the way, this brings up something I was thinking about: timing and decision-making, right? Because we're in the middle of this pandemic and the politics and the elections for Americans and all the things that are going on in the world right now. And I don't know if you're noticing this in your practice, but I noticed definitely in my larger community of high EQ women leaders is that there's a lot of talk about, I'm going to wait and see. I'm going to wait until, school's starting. I'm going to wait and see how things go. The election's coming. I'm going to wait and see how things go. And there's sort of this deferring of decision-making that's been happening in my community that makes me really curious about, like, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I see it too, but the deferral of decision-making, that's nothing new. That's always been happening. It's just that I think maybe we're noticing it more now because of everything that's going on. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like it's heightened, if that makes sense. There's people are feeling even more of an element of uncertainty, but it doesn't change what the root of the deferral is, which is, it's procrastination, it's fear. Well,
it's an abdication of personal power, actually. It's waiting for something outside of you to change so that you can do the thing.
Right. And you're the only one who can impact change. Right. If you want change, you have to be the one to do it. Robyn, there are more people out there than ever, I feel like, right now, awakening and feeling a sense of urgency to pursue those dreams or to do something to make a bigger impact. What advice would you have for those people to be able to take action today?
Well, I'm going to give them the same advice that one of my grad school professors gave me when she said, anybody who's thinking about applying to get their PhD, don't wait, do it now. And I took that, that was like a lightning bolt in my system. It was like one of those moments where I realized that now is the time, and now is the only time that we ever have. But if you want to actually make a difference, if you are feeling compelled that I have a bigger message to share, or I have a different way that I want to contribute, or I'm bored, or I'm, tired of being on the rat wheel of corporate or whatever it is, best advice, don't wait, do it now. Yeah. And here's the second part of that. And then make your decision the right decision. True leaders, the leaders who are out there moving and shaking and standing up and standing out and doing the things that people like you and I are doing, Jen, we don't do a whole lot of second guessing. It's like, make the decision and move forward.
Yeah. And a lot of times clarity comes through action. Mm-hmm. Perfectionism kills so many dreams.
Well, perfectionism is so boring, to be honest. But it's a way of staying safe, and it's a way of, and listen, I'm very frank with as I know you know this about me, but I'm very frank. In fact, some of my marketing copy on my website says, my name is Robyn, but let me be frank. And I wish I could claim that I wrote that, but I had an awesome copywriter who came up with that. And I'm like, I just love that. But my point is that the time is now.
The time is now.
And, burning the bridges, I used to read a lot, Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. And one of the stories he tells is about the general who tells his troops, we're taking this land, I'm burning the boats, we're taking this land or we're dying. And he burned the boats. And that's what we really have to do. Not in a dramatic way like that. I think that that's a very overly masculinized way.
It's making a decision. It's going from hoping to knowing.
Mm-hmm. So the word decision comes from the Middle French. So in about the 15th century or so, that word came into being. And literally it means to cut off. So if you think about decisions as cutting off all other options, I think one of the places that very bright, talented people get stuck in is overthinking. And I have so many choices. In fact, one of the messages that I hear a lot from my clients, they're multi-potential. They can do a lot of things well, even things they hate. And so when you have all the choices and you can do all the things, which one do you choose? Well, I always recommend you choose the one that brings you flow, which is where you lose track of time, you become completely engaged in it and absorbed in it, and your abilities are constantly meeting the challenge that's in front of you. So I think that's a really good thing to look at when you're making a decision, is where's the thing that can bring me the most flow? It's not that we're always going to be in flow in our businesses. My goodness. Answering emails does not put me in flow. It puts me to sleep sometimes, unless I'm answering emails from my clients, of course, and then I'm in flow. So,
or me.
What's that?
I said, or me.
or you, that puts me in flow. But we really have to start looking at consciousness in terms of how we're working, how we're living, and do more things that bring us into that flow state of consciousness, which is associated with creativity, which is associated with intuition, with innovation. Those are the activities that are going to be the highest value and make the greatest contribution to the world now and in the future.
That's great advice. Robyn, if someone wants to connect with you or learn more about what you're up to, how can they find you?
Yeah. Well, 2 places. I love to connect on LinkedIn. So my LinkedIn is linkedin.com, and then my profile is Robyn McKay, and then the number 1, Robyn McKay, number 1. And my first name is spelled with a Y, Robyn McKay.
Yep, and
number
we'll
1.
have this in the show notes as well.
Awesome.
For everybody. Yep.
So connect with me there. But I also have this quiz, and it's for high EQ women leaders. And it's answering the question, what's your leadership style? I know all y'all have taken all of the assessments possible in corporate and wherever you've been, but this one is really grounded in a personality assessment that I give to all of my executives who come in and work with me. It's standardized, it's norm-based, and it's something that really helps ground you in who you are and what your style is relative to everybody else in the world, because you do have a unique style. And once you know more about that and you can really take ownership of that, you can make contributions that are above and beyond anything you could have hoped for or imagined. So you can go and take that quiz, and that is on my website. That's drrobynmckay.com. And then it's /leadership quiz. And I know you'll have that in the show notes.
Yep, we'll have that in the show notes as well. Robyn, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh,
it's such a great conversation.
So fun to be here. And I just love the work that you're doing, and so glad you're in the world contributing. And thanks for asking me to be here.
Oh, thank you. I feel the same.
Thank you for listening to the Awake and On Purpose podcast. Please visit us and subscribe to the podcast at awakeandonpurpose.com so you never miss an episode. To learn more about how you can connect with your higher purpose and take that leap of faith to make your impact in the world, visit us at jenniferspor.com. And while you're there, be sure to join our email list for exclusive offers and a weekly dose of inspiration.